The crash was sudden. One moment, everything was calm, and the next, the world was spinning uncontrollably. The creature's eyes shot open as the loud, thunderous sound of metal tearing through the atmosphere filled its ears. It was no longer in control. It felt weightless for a brief moment before a harsh jolt threw it against something hard. The world turned dark. When the creature finally regained consciousness, it found itself lying on the ground. Its body felt strange, heavy, aching, and sore. It could barely move at first, struggling to find the strength to sit up. Slowly, with great effort, it propped itself up on its hands. The first thing it noticed was the air. It felt wrong, thick, dry, and unfamiliar. The strange atmosphere made it hard to breathe, but it forced itself to take a few shallow breaths, trying to gather its senses. The sky above was unlike anything it had ever seen. There was no blue. The clouds weren't fluffy white, but dark, swirling masses that seemed to stretch endlessly across the sky. The sun, if it could even be called that, shone with an unnatural red glow, casting eerie shadows on the landscape. The ground beneath the creature was rocky, uneven, and harsh. It didn't look like Earth at all. Where was it? Panic gripped the creature's chest as it scrambled to its feet, its limbs trembling. It staggered a few steps, the weight of the situation beginning to sink in. There was no sign of life around it, nothing familiar. The plants around it were unlike anything it had ever encountered. They were strange, almost alien-looking, with twisted stems and leaves that glowed faintly in the dim light. Some of the trees towered over it, their trunks gnarled and covered in what seemed like patches of moving, shimmering moss. The creature's heart raced faster with every breath. It stumbled forward, trying to find some sort of direction. There was no sign of any crash site, no wreckage, nothing that could tell it what had happened. It felt completely alone in this strange, unfamiliar world. What was going on? It remembered the sudden crash, the terrifying moments when it thought it might never make it, but it couldn't understand what had gone wrong. It had been flying through the vastness of space, headed toward Earth, but this didn't look like Earth at all. Taking a deep breath, the creature tried to calm itself, focusing on its surroundings. It needed to figure out where it was and what was going on. But the more it looked around, the less it understood. The landscape seemed endless. There were no signs of civilization, no roads, no buildings, just an endless stretch of wild terrain, stretching as far as the eye could see. Was this a mistake? Did it land on the wrong planet? Was it even still on Earth? The creature's legs wobbled as it walked, its eyes darting nervously around, searching for any clue that might explain this strange place. It saw a few distant shapes moving, but they were too far to make out clearly. Were they creatures like it? Were they friendly? Or were they something more dangerous? A shiver ran down its spine. The air was thick with tension, and the sense of being watched was almost unbearable. It couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Suddenly, a low rumbling sound broke the silence, making the creature freeze in place. It spun around, scanning the area. The ground trembled slightly beneath its feet, as if something massive was moving just below the surface. The rumbling grew louder, and then, without warning, the creature saw it, a shadow moving quickly toward it. Something big, something fast. The creature's heart raced. It knew it had to hide. There was no time to think, no time to figure out what was going on. It instinctively crouched behind a large, twisted tree, hoping to stay out of sight. The rumbling sound grew louder, and soon it could hear the sound of heavy footsteps, accompanied by a deep growl. It was getting closer. The creature held its breath, praying it wouldn't be spotted. It could hear the thing moving, its footsteps echoing in the strange silence. The creature dared not move, not even an inch. The sound was so close now, and the creature could feel its heart pounding in its chest, as if the beast could hear it too. The shadows grew longer, and then, in a flash, the creature saw it, a massive figure, towering and covered in dark, scaled armor. It had glowing eyes, and a long tail that whipped back and forth. The creature's eyes widened in fear. It had never seen anything like this before. It was monstrous, its movements slow and deliberate, yet incredibly powerful. It looked around, sniffing the air, as if it knew something was nearby. The creature's mind raced. Was it being hunted? Was it prey? For what felt like an eternity, the creature stayed motionless, holding its breath, praying that the monster wouldn't notice it. The shadow of the creature loomed over it, and just as it thought it might be spotted, the monster moved on, heading in the opposite direction. The creature exhaled in relief, but the fear didn't fade. What was that thing? And why was it here? The creature slowly stood, its legs shaky from the close call. It had narrowly escaped, but there was no time to relax. It still didn't know where it was, or how it had gotten here. It needed answers, but the more it tried to think, the more confused it became. Was it still on Earth? Was this some kind of mistake? Or was it something far worse? The creature took another deep breath and began walking again, its eyes constantly scanning the horizon for any more dangers. It couldn't stay in one place for too long. It had to find out what was happening, to understand how it had ended up here. But the more it walked, the more it realized how truly isolated it felt. There was no help, no one to guide it through this strange new world. It was completely on its own. And that thought sent a chill through its spine. "Where am I?" it whispered, almost to itself, as it continued forward. As it walked deeper into this foreign land, the creature couldn't shake the feeling that it was being watched. Something was out there. Something knew it was here. And it was only a matter of time before it found out what it was, and why it had landed on this strange, terrifying world. The creature moved cautiously, its senses heightened with every step. The strange world around it felt both alien and eerily familiar. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The creature's mind raced, trying to piece together what it had just experienced. Was it a dream? A nightmare? It couldn't be. The crash had been too real, too terrifying. But this place, it didn't make sense. It tried to recall the moments before the crash, the blinding lights of the spacecraft, the sudden jerks and shakes, the chaos. The creature had been heading towards Earth, or at least it thought it had been. Yet now it was here, on a planet that didn't seem to be Earth at all. Where am I? The question repeated in its mind like an echo, but no answer came. The more it looked around, the more questions arose. There was no sign of human civilization, no familiar landmarks. The horizon stretched on endlessly, filled with twisted trees and jagged rocks that looked like they belonged in a place far from home. The very soil beneath its feet felt unnatural, almost as though it was shifting with its every movement. The creature paused to gather its thoughts, staring up at the sky again. The red hue of the sun was still there, casting an eerie glow over everything. No sun should look like that. So red, so unnatural. The clouds above seemed to swirl unnaturally, dark and threatening, as if the atmosphere itself was unstable, teetering on the edge of something catastrophic. This wasn't Earth. But if it wasn't, then what was it? As it walked, its eyes remained on high alert. The strange terrain was vast and unwelcoming. The creature's heart beat faster as it ventured deeper into this unfamiliar place, its feet dragging through the dusty ground. Every now and then, it could hear faint noises, a rustling of leaves, or the distant calls of creatures it couldn't see. The world was alive, but it didn't feel like it should be. Then, out of the corner of its eye, something moved. The creature froze, its body tensing instinctively. It wasn't the same beast it had seen earlier. No, this was something different, smaller, quicker, and far more agile. It darted between the trees, too fast for the creature to get a clear look, but there was something about it that felt wrong, unnatural. It moved in a way that was too fluid, too precise. The creature took a cautious step forward, its senses on high alert. It couldn't help but feel as if something was watching it, hunting it. Its instincts screamed at it to run, to hide, but it couldn't shake the feeling that the answers it needed were somewhere in this bizarre land. Maybe if it could figure out what was going on, it could find a way back to where it belonged. Suddenly, the creature stopped in its tracks. There, just ahead of it, was a shape. It was vague at first, blending in with the shadows of the twisted trees. But as the creature moved closer, it realized what it was: a large, stone structure, half hidden by the dense underbrush. The walls were cracked, ancient, and covered in moss, but there was something undeniably human about it. The creature's heart skipped a beat. Could this be it? Could this be the clue it had been searching for? It approached the structure cautiously, the hairs on its back standing on end. The air felt colder here, and the once distant sounds of rustling seemed to fade. The creature reached out, its hand brushing against the surface of the stone. It was rough and cold, covered in strange markings that were too faded to make sense of. The symbols were unfamiliar, nothing like the language the creature knew. They seemed ancient, like they had been carved into the stone centuries ago. Curiosity burned in the creature's chest. What had happened here? Who had built this structure, and why? It stepped closer, noticing that a large portion of the stone wall had crumbled away, leaving a gap wide enough for it to slip through. Hesitant but determined, the creature crawled through the opening, emerging into a dark chamber inside. The space was eerily silent. It was darker than the outside, with only faint traces of light filtering in through cracks in the stone. The air smelled musty and stale, like something long forgotten. The creature's eyes adjusted to the dim light as it moved deeper into the chamber, carefully examining its surroundings. There, in the center of the room, stood a strange object, a pedestal with something resting atop it. The creature's pulse quickened. What was that? It moved forward, its steps slow and deliberate, until it reached the pedestal. The object on top was small, no larger than the creature's hand, and it glowed faintly in the darkness. It looked like a crystal of some sort, with swirling patterns inside that seemed to shift as the creature stared at it. As it reached out to touch it, a sudden noise stopped it in its tracks, a sharp, unnatural sound coming from behind. The creature spun around, its heart racing once again. It wasn't alone. The sound was louder now, growing closer. It was like the sound of footsteps, but much heavier, much more threatening. The creature's eyes darted around the room, searching for any place to hide. There was nowhere. The walls were too high, the chamber too small. It was trapped. And then the creature saw it. Through the cracks in the stone, a dark silhouette appeared. The shadows seemed to shift and move, as if the very walls were alive. The creature's heart skipped a beat. Was it the same monster from earlier, or something worse? The creature's breath hitched as it stepped back, unsure of what to do. It could run, but where? It could hide, but that might not be enough. Whatever was coming, it was getting closer, and there was no time to think. The creature grabbed the glowing crystal from the pedestal, clutching it in its hand as it prepared for whatever was about to happen. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, thick with tension, and just as the dark figure emerged fully into the chamber, the creature bolted. It didn't know where it was running to, but it couldn't stand still any longer. As it ran, the heavy footsteps followed, growing louder and louder, until it felt like the ground beneath it was shaking. The creature pushed forward, heart pounding in its chest. Whatever was chasing it, whatever it had found in this strange, alien world, was far from over. The sense of dread was palpable now, the crystal in its hand the only thing keeping it grounded as it raced through the darkness, desperate to survive. The chase had only just begun, and there was no turning back. The creature's heart pounded as it ran, its breath shallow and quick. The air around it seemed to thicken with each step, as though the very atmosphere was closing in. It didn't dare look back, but the sound of heavy footsteps echoed behind it, growing closer with each passing second. The creature's instincts screamed at it to keep moving, to push its body harder, but its limbs were growing tired. It could feel the weight of its exhaustion, and yet the terror fueling its escape kept it going. The stone walls around it seemed to close in as it sprinted through the narrow passages. There were no windows, no openings. The only source of light came from the dim glow of the crystal in its hand, which pulsed faintly with each frantic step. It was as if the crystal itself was alive, reacting to the creature's fear and urgency. But what was it? Why had it glowed like that? And why had the creature felt so compelled to take it? As it rounded a corner, the creature stumbled, its foot catching on a jagged stone. It barely managed to catch itself, its hands slamming against the cold floor. For a moment, it lay there, gasping for air, its chest heaving as the sounds of the pursuing footsteps grew louder. It couldn't afford to stop, not even for a second. But its body refused to obey. It was too tired, too worn down from the crash and the constant running. Its vision blurred as its heart raced. It felt like it might collapse at any moment. The footsteps drew closer, and the creature forced itself to stand again, pushing through the pain in its limbs. It had no choice. It had to keep moving. In the distance, a faint light flickered, too far to reach, but it gave the creature a new sense of urgency. A possible exit. A way out. The light beckoned, offering hope where there had been none. The creature surged forward, ignoring the sharp rocks beneath its feet and the bruises forming on its skin. It was too close now. If it stopped now, it would be caught. The light grew brighter as the creature neared it, and then, finally, it burst out into an open space. It was a vast cavern, much larger than the small chamber it had been running through. The ceiling stretched far above, dotted with faint glimmers of what looked like crystals embedded in the rock. The cavern was eerily silent now, save for the creature's heavy breathing. But the moment of respite didn't last long. From the shadows at the edge of the cavern, something moved. The creature's eyes darted to the movement. There, standing just beyond the light, was another creature, one far different from the one it had encountered before. This new creature was humanoid in shape, but its features were twisted and distorted. Its skin was a sickly gray, and its eyes glowed faintly, the same eerie light as the crystal in the creature's hand. It looked at the creature with a cold, calculating stare, as if it had been waiting for it. The creature froze, its heart skipping a beat. Was this what had been following it? Was this thing responsible for the terror it had felt? The humanoid figure stepped closer, its movements slow but deliberate. It didn't speak, but its presence was overwhelming, like a weight pressing down on the creature's chest. "Who are you?" The creature wanted to ask, but no words escaped its mouth. It was too terrified, too confused to form a coherent thought. The humanoid creature raised a hand, its fingers long and clawed. The creature instinctively took a step back, clutching the glowing crystal tighter in its hand. It didn't know why, but it felt as though the crystal was the only thing standing between it and whatever this creature wanted. The light from the crystal pulsed brighter, responding to the humanoid's presence, as if they were connected in some way. For a long moment, neither creature moved. The humanoid watched, its glowing eyes never leaving the creature's face. The air in the cavern grew thicker, more oppressive, and the creature could feel the weight of the tension pressing on it. It didn't know what to do. Could it fight? Could it reason with this thing? Was it even alive, or was it some sort of monster? Without warning, the humanoid creature took a step forward, and the ground beneath the creature's feet seemed to vibrate. It stumbled backward, but the humanoid didn't stop. Another step, and another. The creature could feel its pulse quickening, its breathing becoming shallow. The humanoid's gaze didn't waver, and the creature had no choice but to keep retreating. "Stay away!" The creature wanted to shout, but again, it found itself frozen in place. The fear had completely taken over. It had no idea how to defend itself, and in this strange new world, it didn't even know what would help. The humanoid creature was almost upon it now. The air between them crackled with an unnatural energy, and the creature could feel the hairs on the back of its neck standing up. It was too late to run now. It was trapped, cornered, with nowhere to go. Then, Just as the humanoid raised its hand, ready to strike, the crystal in the creature's hand flared to life. Glowing brightly as though it had a mind of its own, the humanoid halted, its eyes narrowing, confused by the sudden burst of energy. The creature gasped, its hand shaking as it felt the power surge through its body. It was as if the crystal was reacting to the danger, pushing back against the humanoid's presence. The humanoid took another step back, its face twisting in an expression the creature couldn't quite read. It was a mix of surprise and anger, as if it hadn't expected the crystal to have such power. The creature's mind raced. Was this it? Was this what it needed to survive? To escape? Before the creature could make a move, the humanoid stepped back completely, its gaze flicking between the glowing crystal and the creature. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the creature had won, had found something that could keep it safe. But then, the humanoid turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the creature alone once again. The light from the crystal slowly faded, but the creature was left shaken, its mind reeling from what had just happened. It still didn't know where it was, or what this strange world had in store for it. But one thing was certain, it couldn't trust anything here, whatever was happening. The dangers were far from over, and the creature knew that it couldn't let its guard down, not for a single moment. It was alone in this strange, hostile world, and the answers it sought were still just out of reach. The creature stood there for what felt like an eternity, its body trembling with both fear and exhaustion. The cavern around it was still, save for the occasional drip of water echoing off the distant walls. The pale light from the crystal in its hand had dimmed, leaving the creature in near total darkness once again. Its chest rose and fell as it tried to steady its breath, but the cold dread that gripped its heart wouldn't go away. The humanoid creature had vanished, but the fear it had left behind lingered like a shadow. What was that thing? The creature couldn't shake the image of the humanoid figure from its mind. Its glowing eyes, its twisted, unnatural appearance. It had felt like it wasn't just a physical threat, but something far more sinister, like a force of nature. The way the creature had stopped when the crystal reacted made it clear that the glowing object held power the humanoid had feared. But why? What was the connection between the two? And more importantly, what did this mean for the creature? The silence in the cavern was deafening. It almost felt suffocating. The creature looked around once more, the distant shadows seeming to twist and shift in the dim light. Was it safe to stay here? It didn't know. It didn't know anything anymore. The ground beneath its feet felt unstable, and the deeper it went into the cavern, the more uncertain it became. It could hear faint sounds, whispers almost, or perhaps just its mind playing tricks. But they seemed to grow louder, coming from every direction. Was it really alone? With a determined breath, the creature tightened its grip on the crystal and turned away from the spot where the humanoid had vanished. It couldn't afford to linger here, not when it had no idea what dangers lurked beyond the shadows. It had to keep moving, find answers, find safety, and hopefully, find a way back home. As it moved deeper into the cavern, the creature could feel something else, something ancient and powerful, like an invisible force pressing against it. The cavern walls seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as if they themselves were alive, or maybe something had been here before. The creature could almost feel the vibrations in the air, as though the ground beneath its feet was charged with electricity. What was this place? Why did it feel so alive? The path grew narrower, the walls closing in around the creature, forcing it to move cautiously. The atmosphere had a heaviness to it, and with every step, the creature's mind grew more clouded with thoughts of escape. But every instinct told it that it couldn't just run. It needed to know what was happening, to understand why it had ended up here, and what had caused this world to be so different from Earth. Then, as it rounded another bend, it froze. Ahead, a faint light flickered, soft, like the glow of a faraway fire. The creature's first instinct was to avoid it, to stay hidden. But there was something about it that pulled it forward, like a moth to a flame. What was that? Was it another trap? A creature waiting to pounce? Or was it something else entirely? Another sign that it wasn't the first to crash here. With careful steps, the creature crept toward the light, staying as quiet as possible. The air around it grew colder, and the flickering light became clearer. It wasn't a fire. It wasn't a creature either. It was a door, a massive stone archway, glowing faintly with runes carved deep into the surface. The glow pulsed rhythmically, as if alive, and the markings on the door seemed to shift when the creature's eyes lingered on them too long. The creature approached cautiously, its pulse quickening. Was this some sort of gateway? Could this be the answer it had been searching for? But there was a lingering unease in its chest. It didn't know how to open the door or what it would find on the other side. But there was no other way, no other option but to press forward. Tentatively, the creature reached out, its fingers brushing against the cold stone. The moment it made contact, the glow intensified, and a low hum resonated through the air. The runes flared to life, the markings shifting rapidly, and the ground beneath the creature's feet seemed to tremble. A sharp crack of energy sparked from the doorway, and the creature instinctively pulled its hand back. The hum grew louder. The creature's heart raced. It stepped back, unsure of what was happening. The door seemed to respond to its presence, as if it recognized something in the creature. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. Was this the moment? Would it open? Or was this just another trap in this strange world? The creature didn't have time to think it through. It had no choice. It needed answers, and this door was the only thing that might lead to them. With a deep breath, the creature stepped closer again, pushing its doubts aside. This time, it placed both hands on the cold stone. The moment its palms touched the surface, the entire cavern seemed to shake. The runes flared brighter, almost blinding in their intensity. A deep, resonating sound echoed from within the door, as if it were opening, or waking up. Suddenly, the stone trembled beneath its hands, and a blinding flash of light erupted from the doorway. The creature stumbled backward, shielding its eyes as the ground shook violently. It was like an explosion of energy, a pulse that seemed to ripple through the cavern itself. The creature's heart pounded as the light grew brighter and brighter, until, with a final crack, the light faded, and everything went silent. When the creature opened its eyes, it saw that the door had changed. It wasn't just a stone arch anymore. It was a portal, a swirling mass of energy, like a tunnel to another world. The air around it seemed charged with the force of the portal, the atmosphere buzzing with power. For a moment, the creature simply stared at the portal, its mind racing. This was it. This was the answer it had been looking for. But what was on the other side? Was it the way home? Or was it another nightmare waiting to consume it? The portal pulsed again, as though beckoning it forward, as if it was waiting for the creature to make its choice. There was no turning back now. With a final, shaky breath, the creature stepped toward the glowing doorway. The moment its foot crossed the threshold, the ground beneath it seemed to vanish. The world around it twisted, and the creature felt a rush of wind and energy. It couldn't breathe. It couldn't think. The portal sucked it in, pulling it forward with a force it couldn't resist. Everything around it spun, and for a fleeting moment, the creature wondered if it was making the right decision. Was this the escape it had been searching for, or was it walking straight into another trap? But before it could make sense of anything, the darkness swallowed it whole. The creature's mind spun as it felt the world around it twist, warp, and stretch. It couldn't tell which way was up or down, and the overwhelming force pulling it through the portal seemed to crush every thought it tried to hold on to. The air was thick, like it was being submerged underwater, but there was no water, just an oppressive, heavy pressure. The light from the portal flickered around it, growing brighter and more intense until everything went white. The creature's senses shut down in an instant, and it felt as if its body was being torn apart by the energy surging through it. And then, suddenly, everything stopped. There was no light, no sound, no pressure. For a moment, the creature wondered if it had gone unconscious. But then it felt something. A soft, warm breeze against its skin, the faintest sound of rustling leaves. It blinked, its eyes slowly adjusting to the new environment. The creature stood in a vast, open field. The sky above was bright, a vivid blue, with no sign of the strange red sun or the eerie clouds it had seen earlier. Everything felt different, and yet something about this place seemed oddly familiar. The landscape stretched out before it, lush green grass, rolling hills in the distance, and trees that looked more natural, more alive than anything it had encountered in this strange world so far. The air smelled fresh, crisp, like spring. It was almost peaceful. For a moment, the creature simply stood there, trying to make sense of where it was. The sense of terror it had felt in the cavern faded away, replaced by confusion and a lingering sense of uncertainty. Had it crossed over to another dimension? Had it found Earth again? But no, something about this place felt wrong. Too perfect, too untouched. It was as if the land had been waiting for something or someone. The creature's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any signs of life, anything that might explain where it had landed. But the field stretched on endlessly, and there was no sign of the humanoid figure or any other creatures. No sounds except for the wind, and no movement. It was quiet, almost unnaturally so. It felt exposed here, vulnerable. The crystal still clutched tightly in its hand pulsed faintly, as if responding to the strange surroundings. The creature looked at the glowing object, then back at the field. Was this a new beginning, or was it another test? Another trap? It had to be careful. It couldn't afford to be caught off guard again. As the creature took a cautious step forward, it noticed something in the distance, something that didn't quite belong. At the edge of the field, standing at the foot of a distant hill, was a structure. It looked almost like a house, though it was unlike any the creature had ever seen. The building was tall, made of stone, and covered in vines that seemed to pulse with a strange, glowing energy. It was ancient, but it looked well-preserved. Too well-preserved, as if it had been untouched by time itself. A sense of dread stirred in the creature's chest. It couldn't help but feel like this place had been waiting for its arrival. But why? What was this structure? Was it the source of the strange energy that had pulled it through the portal? The creature took another step, then another, moving slowly towards the structure. It was a decision made out of necessity. It couldn't stay here in the open field. The feeling of being watched, of something lurking in the distance, hung heavy in the air. The creature didn't trust this place. Not yet. As it neared the building, the glow from the vines grew brighter. They pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, as if the structure itself was alive. The creature hesitated before stepping closer to the door. The feeling of being drawn toward it was almost overwhelming, like the stone itself was calling to it. With a steadying breath, the creature placed its hand on the door, and it opened with a soft, almost imperceptible sound. The moment it stepped inside, the temperature dropped. The air grew cooler, and a faint humming sound echoed in the walls. The room beyond was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the same glowing vines that covered the outside of the building. The walls were adorned with intricate symbols and designs, symbols that looked vaguely familiar, but the creature couldn't place them. They were ancient, yet strangely modern. They seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the vines, alive with energy. The creature's heart raced. There was no turning back now. This was it, the place it had been pulled to, the place it needed to understand. What had it found? What had it awakened? As its eyes scanned the room, it noticed a pedestal in the center. On top of it was a stone tablet, covered in the same glowing symbols that adorned the walls. The creature felt drawn to it, as if it were meant to be there. As it approached the pedestal, the light from the symbols intensified, and the air around it seemed to hum with energy. The crystal in its hand began to glow brighter, its light synchronizing with the pulsing energy of the room. Slowly, almost reverently, the creature reached out and touched the tablet. The moment its fingers made contact, A jolt of energy shot through the creature's body. The world around it seemed to spin once more, but this time it was different. The light from the tablet flooded its mind, filling it with images, visions of things it couldn't understand. Strange cities, alien landscapes, distant worlds, and dark, shadowy figures that moved with terrifying speed. Then, as quickly as it had started, the visions stopped. The creature staggered back, its mind reeling. What had it seen? What was this? The stone tablet seemed to hum with power, its symbols shifting before its eyes, rearranging themselves. The creature looked at the pedestal again, but this time it saw something else. Beneath the tablet, hidden from view, was an inscription, written in a language it didn't recognize. But there was something familiar about it, something that pulled at the creature's memory. It couldn't make sense of the words, but they felt important. They felt like the key to something bigger, something deeper. The creature's hands shook as it stepped back from the pedestal. This place, this structure, was more than just a shelter. It was a repository of knowledge, of secrets. And the creature had just uncovered a small part of it. But what was it? What did it all mean? And what was it supposed to do with this newfound knowledge? The crystal in its hand pulsed once more, brighter than before, and the creature could feel its power building. The door behind it slammed shut, and the entire room seemed to shift. The structure had not been a refuge, it had been a test. The creature wasn't alone anymore. Something was watching. Something was waiting. And it was just beginning. The room felt alive. The walls seemed to pulse with an almost rhythmic beat, and the energy from the stone tablet reverberated through the creature's bones. It had barely recovered from the overwhelming surge of power when the air around it grew even thicker, heavier, as if something was gathering just beyond the reach of its perception. The creature's heartbeat thudded in its chest, each beat louder than the last. The quiet hum in the room became almost deafening now. It could feel the pressure building in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. There was no turning back. The creature instinctively took a step back from the pedestal, but its feet felt rooted to the ground, as if the very stone beneath it was holding it in place. The air shifted. A cold breeze, unnatural and sharp, blew through the room despite the fact that there were no windows. The vines on the walls, which had once pulsed with a soft light, now flickered ominously, their glow shifting to a deep, unsettling crimson. The temperature plummeted. It felt as though the world outside the building had suddenly faded into a distant memory, replaced by a vast emptiness. Then, from the shadows at the far end of the room, a figure emerged. The creature froze. Its heart skipped a beat. The figure was tall and slender, draped in a cloak that seemed to ripple with energy, like the night sky swirling with dark clouds. Its features were hidden beneath the hood, but the creature could feel its gaze, cold, piercing, and full of ancient knowledge. It didn't need to see its eyes to know that this was no ordinary being. The figure's presence was overwhelming. The room seemed to bend around it, the energy in the space reacting to its very existence. The creature could feel its body tensing, its instincts screaming at it to run, to escape. But where could it go? It was trapped, locked within this strange, alien structure with no way out. The figure stepped closer, moving with a fluid grace, its every movement deliberate and controlled. The air around it seemed to shimmer, distorting slightly, as if reality itself was bending at its will. "You have awakened it," a voice echoed, low and resonant, like a distant thunderclap. The sound vibrated through the creature's chest, sending ripples of fear through its body. The voice wasn't one that the creature recognized. It was ancient, timeless, filled with an authority that demanded obedience. It was a voice that belonged to someone who knew the world in ways the creature could never understand. The creature's mouth went dry, its mind racing for something to say, but nothing came. The figure paused in front of the pedestal, its hand raising slowly, almost lazily, and the glowing symbols on the stone tablet flickered in response. The figure's voice dropped to a whisper, but the words carried a weight, as though they were spoken in an ancient language that resonated through time itself. "You should not have touched it," it said, its words heavy with warning. "You are not ready. No one is." The creature's pulse quickened. What did it mean? What was this it? What was the stone tablet? The crystal in its hand seemed to pulse more strongly now, as if it was responding to the presence of the figure. The creature had no answers, only more questions. But one thing was painfully clear. It had made a grave mistake by interacting with this power. This place, whatever it was not meant for beings like it. "I had to know," the creature whispered, though the words felt hollow, as though they were nothing more than an excuse. "What is this place? What is this power?" The figure's cloak shifted, and it took a step closer, its voice becoming sharper, more direct. "This place is not for you. Not yet. You are out of time. The portal you crossed, it was never meant for you. You are a disturbance, a mistake." The creature's mind reeled. A disturbance. A mistake. What did that mean? Had it never been supposed to cross through the portal? Was everything that had happened, every terrifying encounter, part of some larger, unseen design? The figure's cloak fluttered, and the creature could feel the temperature drop even further, the chill creeping into its bones. The air around them seemed to shimmer with dark energy, and the room felt even more constricted. The walls, once solid stone, seemed to breathe, and the vines on the ceiling twisted, their glowing red light pulsing with a growing intensity. "Do you not understand?" the figure asked, its voice cutting through the silence. "You are not meant to be here. This power does not belong to you, and yet you wield it. That will change." The figure raised a hand toward the creature, and for the briefest of moments, the crystal in its hand flared with a blinding light. The creature staggered back, its mind racing. It couldn't think straight. What was happening? What was this being? And why had it called the creature a disturbance? Was it not meant to find the tablet? Was this entire journey nothing more than a mistake? Before the creature could make sense of it, the figure spoke again, its voice colder than before. "I will give you one chance. Leave this place now. Return to the world from which you came, and forget everything. If you do not, the consequences will be dire." The creature's head spun. It couldn't leave, not without answers, not without understanding. But the weight of the figure's words pressed heavily on its chest. This being, this ancient entity, held power that the creature could not even begin to comprehend. The room seemed to close in around it, the temperature dropping even further, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. The glowing symbols on the walls flickered ominously, as though they were warning the creature too. It knew the decision it faced was not one it could make lightly. This place, these entities, the power contained within the stone tablet, it was all far beyond what it had expected. The crystal in its hand pulsed again, this time with an urgency that seemed almost like a warning. But the creature couldn't shake the sense that it was connected to this power in some way, that it was part of something larger, something far more dangerous. "I can't go back," the creature whispered, its voice barely audible over the hum of the room. "I need to understand." The figure did not reply immediately, but its presence loomed larger, darker, filling the entire room. The air was thick with tension, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Finally, the figure lowered its hand, and the air seemed to settle, the oppressive weight lifting just a fraction. "Then you will learn," it said, its voice carrying the weight of inevitability. "But be warned, you will not like what you uncover. There are forces far older than you can comprehend, and they do not take kindly to trespassers." Before the creature could respond, the figure turned, its cloak swirling around it. The air around it seemed to ripple, and the shadows in the room deepened. The creature stood frozen, the crystal still pulsing in its hand, as the figure disappeared into the darkness beyond the walls. The echoes of its final words reverberated in the creature's mind, and it realized, with a heavy heart, that the true journey was just beginning. The answers it sought would come at a price, one it wasn't sure it was ready to pay. The stone tablet's light flickered again, and the room seemed to tremble. The creature took a deep breath, its resolve hardening. It had made its choice. There was no turning back now. The question was no longer whether it should learn. Now, it was about how much it was willing to sacrifice to uncover the truth. The room had returned to a tense stillness, but the creature's heart was racing. The figure, that ancient, powerful being, had vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only the weight of its words. The air still shimmered with the energy it had left behind, as if the entire space was vibrating with anticipation. The creature stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. The figure's warning echoed in its mind. There are forces far older than you can comprehend, and they do not take kindly to trespassers. The creature could feel the pull of the tablet, the power thrumming in its hand. The glow had dimmed but was still faintly visible, its light pulsing like a heartbeat, synchronized with the beat of the creature's own heart. It was as though the tablet itself was alive, communicating with the crystal, urging it to seek answers, to uncover secrets long hidden. Yet the figure's warning was impossible to ignore. What had it stumbled upon? Was it truly ready for whatever this place might reveal? The creature felt the weight of the decision it had made. It had defied the ancient being, rejected its offer to return, and in doing so, it had committed to a path that it could not unwalk. It had crossed the threshold into the unknown, and there was no going back. A low hum began to reverberate from the stone tablet once again. The symbols on the tablet flickered in and out of focus, as though the energy was calling to something deeper, something beyond the walls of the room. The vines along the walls trembled, their crimson glow flickering, casting strange shadows that seemed to move on their own. It was as if the entire structure was alive, watching, waiting, reacting. The creature took a deep breath, gathering its courage. It couldn't afford to stand still, to hesitate now. It had made its choice to learn, to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. With a steadying hand, it placed the crystal down beside the stone tablet. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement, just the silent pulse of energy from both the tablet and the crystal. But then, the symbols on the tablet began to shift, rearranging themselves before the creature's eyes, faster than it could follow. The walls seemed to tremble, and the room was filled with an intense, almost deafening hum. The creature backed away, but the pull of the energy was stronger now. It was as though the room itself had come alive and was reaching out to the creature, pulling it closer to the pedestal. The stone tablet flared to life, its light expanding, filling the room with a blinding brightness that seemed to bend time and space. The creature's vision blurred, and it felt its body being drawn toward the light. Suddenly, everything stopped. The light faded, and the room fell silent once more. The creature blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to the sudden change. The energy, the vibrations, everything that had been so overwhelming a moment ago, was gone. The air was still, but the creature knew something had changed. In the center of the room, a new presence lingered. A figure stood before the pedestal, but this one was different. Unlike the shadowy being that had warned it earlier, this one radiated calm. It was taller, its form less defined, like a silhouette in a fog. The creature could sense that it was not flesh and bone, but something else, something intangible yet undeniably powerful. The figure's voice, soft but commanding, echoed through the room, filling the silence with its resonance. "You have crossed the threshold. You have chosen the path of knowledge." The creature froze, instinctively knowing that this was no ordinary being. This was something much older, something connected to the very forces that had been warning it. I don't understand. What is this place?" the creature asked, its voice betraying its fear. The figure's presence seemed to grow stronger, as though it was absorbing the creature's confusion, feeding off its uncertainty. "This place is a gateway, a place of learning, of secrets hidden deep within time itself." Those who seek knowledge here must be prepared to face the consequences of what they uncover. What consequences? The creature's voice was barely a whisper now, the weight of the words pressing down on it like a physical force. The figure tilted its head, its form shifting slightly, as though it were studying the creature. The price of knowledge is steep. The truth you seek may not be what you wish to find. What you learn here could destroy you, or it could grant you the power to change the course of history. But be warned, once you know the truth, there is no unknowing. You will be bound by it, shaped by it, for all eternity. The creature felt the chill of the figure's words settle deep into its bones. The idea of the truth, something hidden from all but a few, perhaps something so monumental that it could change everything, was both intoxicating and terrifying. The desire to understand, to uncover the mysteries of this place, was overwhelming. But the figure's warning lingered in its mind, like a shadow it couldn't shake. What if the cost of this knowledge was more than it could bear? Why me? The creature asked, its voice trembling with uncertainty. Why am I the one who's here? Why was I chosen to find this place? The figure's form seemed to ripple, its edges becoming less defined, as though it were unraveling. You are not the first to seek the truth. Many have come before you, but most were unworthy. They were consumed by the knowledge they uncovered. But you have the potential to withstand it. Your journey has only just begun. The room grew colder, the air heavier, as if the figure's very words were creating an unseen weight that pressed down on the creature. You will face challenges. You will be tested. And in the end, you must decide what to do with the knowledge you gain. Will you use it to reshape the world? Or will it destroy you, as it has destroyed so many before? The creature stood motionless, the words ringing in its mind. Its heart raced. It had come this far, but was it truly ready for the truth? What would it do with the knowledge it had already uncovered? It had wanted answers, but now that they were within reach, it wasn't sure if it could handle what it might find. The figure's voice cut through the silence once more, softer now, almost soothing. Go forth, then. But know this, knowledge is not free. You must be prepared for what lies ahead. The room began to dissolve, the edges of the walls fading into nothingness. The creature felt a pull again, stronger this time, as though the space itself was pulling it towards something beyond. A new realm, a new challenge awaited, and there was no turning back. The last thing the creature heard before everything went black was the figure's final words. Choose wisely, for the fate of many rests in your hands. The creature's chest tightened, the weight of those words hanging heavy in the air as the darkness enveloped it.